As I mentioned earlier, Pete started providing for his family of 9, including himself and his mom and dad, at the age of 8. As the family became larger, growing up, they ate more. Pete had to work more. He took various jobs that were a little bit more strenuous and harder, that allowed him to go to work on an ice wagon. If you could kind of envision, I'll try to paint the picture for you, the ice wagons. There was a factory. You would get ice that would be cut up in chunks that were literally, keep in mind, 9 to 11 years old, that age period. He was picking up ice that were roughly 50 to up to 100 pounds. They'd put them on ice wagons at the place where the ice was brought in and made, and they were made with some sort of vaporization of refrigeration and whatever back then in that period. Very, very meager, but they formed ice, and then the ice had to be cut into blocks. Once they were cut into blocks, they were put onto wagons. People in that period that were able to afford not a refrigerator, they were called ice boxes. They were insulated, basically little structures with a top that would hold ice. If you were in a position to afford an ice box, you got ice. If you weren't, you try to put it in the coolest place you could and keep it for as long as you could or eat as fast as you could so it didn't spoil. And Pete would get alongside the driver of the ice wagon that had maybe 4 horses, and he'd go up the streets to the various tenements, these buildings that would have anywhere from 3 flights of stairs, 4 flights, 5 flights, 6 flights of stairs. Some of these tenements had. And those in those days were skyscrapers, 6 stories. Pete, again, 9 to 11 years old, would drag that ice with ice tongs. Think of maybe a scissor, of course larger, wood handles on it, and sharp points that would dig into the ice. Pete would grab that and drag it up 3 flights, 4 flights, 5 flights or more. Then when he got to the apartment, he needed help, so the driver came up and helped him put it up on top of the icebox. And that ice would last the individuals anywhere from 4, 5, 6 days, possibly a week, until it all melted out. And there was a pan on the bottom that they had to keep emptying the water from the ice that liquefied. And he would do this every day through the week, weeks on end. He needed money. There was a job he found where people in those days, think again, there were no washing machines or dryers as we have today. They were individuals. Their clothes were garments that were very large. And I'm not saying that every individual, including the mothers of the home or whatever, had them, but they were long dresses. Even the mothers and whatever that cooked and whatever in the homes, the dresses were below the knees. They went out on the street, they had these long gowns with crinolines and all kinds of stuff underneath, and big blouses, hats. That would be if you had the money to do that. And they would walk up and down the street. Keep in mind, again, I say, the streets were not paved. This is what it was back then. So the people that could afford it would send their clothes out to a place that would wash them. So they'd send them out dry, and then they'd go with, again, another wagon or whoever it was that employed these wagons, and put these wet garments that were squeeze dried as best they could, but still damp and wet, in bags or sheets or whatever that could weigh up to 100 pounds. Again, the thickness of the dress, these were not leggings or things like that we have today, lightweight blouses and all. These were heavy material. And again, they had to be brought into these places in the sheet or whatever that was tied up and dragged again like he did with the ice. And he was doing this back and forth with ice and the wet laundry. He was, again, 11, maybe 12. And he'd drag it up the tenements. And again, they were wet. And we have what, I don't know, any of you know or ever heard of clotheslines. Clotheslines. They were lines that were strung between the buildings. The buildings were close, and one lady on one side would, a thin rope that clothing could go on, and the other person on the other side would have like rollers, and they would roll the clothing back and forth. They would hold the clothing by clothespins, wooden kinds of forks, so to speak, tiny, but that would hold the clothes on the line. And if they didn't have it, they'd drape them over the line. That's how they dried. There was no dryer. There was no washers. That's how they dried. Can we imagine that? Can we envision that? I'm trying to paint a picture for you to have you not only listen to my words, but get into your being able to see what a little 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old was seeing. As I got older, I might have been in my early teens, you never saw your mother or father in any way nude or underwear or anything like that. That was just something was prohibited. They didn't show. We always wondered, how were we born? But my father was working the farm at the time. I'm advancing a little bit just to give you an idea. And I noticed that he had come out of the shower and the door was ajar. And for whatever reason, inquisitive 15-year-old, 16-year-old, I noticed that my dad had a hernia. I found that unusual. Well, of course, I wouldn't ask my father. So I went to my mother. And I said, Mom, I have to ask you. I said, I happened to notice after I got out of the shower that the door was partially open, and I noticed that he had what I think to be a hernia. And she said, yes, your father got that at a very, very young age when he was dragging the ice or the wet laundry bags up those tenement buildings, up 5, 6 flights of stairs. I stopped for a second, and I have you think, how many kids that age have hernias? Probably none. Pete did. We never knew it. Never said a word, never complained. That was Pete. That's who he was. That's what I'm trying to convey. When I look at our society today and I look back then, we've come a long way. We really have. But I think what we've lost is the pride in our work, in our ethic of what we have to do no matter what. Am I advancing the thought of child labor? Absolutely not. But again, I take you back to that period, 100 and maybe 10 years ago. That's what it was. That's what it was like. You look at New York City today and you see sprawling sidewalks and 100-story buildings and all this kind of stuff. Well, that's not the way it was back 100 plus years ago. It was dirt and cobblestone streets. All these kind of things comprised and made up what New York was during that period. And I'm trying to give you a picture of what his life was like during that period. As a footnote to modern inventions of today, we would not have our kids go out and work like that because of the advancement of machinery and so on. There's all kinds of washers and dryers and air conditioning and things like that. We've got what we call the creature comforts. I add that because of the comparison of what was and now what is. We've come a long way, and yes, we have technology and so forth. But have we come a long way in the work ethic that Pete had? Have we? Or have we lost that? Have we lost the pride in our work? Have we lost the pride in our family? I think those are the questions you have to ask. I just wanted to add that and let you know my true feelings as I give you these videos and explain to you life as it was and life as it is. If any of you out there have similar stories or stories you'd like to share with me, I would very, very much appreciate it. You're either writing in or subscribing or whatever you feel you're content in doing. I would like that. And I thank you very, very much for your time.